focusing. Yesterday we were elucidating some of the Sutra's teaching on the Tathagata's nirvana. And we covered a lot of very important points that basically talked about the development of a person's individual experience and practice. And there was a long list of cool things. And today, another motif is brought up. We're continuing to answer, recall, the Buddha's answering this question of what is nirvana, okay? And this is the crescendo. This is the cadenza, the end of the thing. He goes now to elucidate nirvana in a way that I think it's really critical for us to understand. It's all critical, but the more I commune with this sutra and listen to it, the more I can see how radically influential it has been in the entirety of Chan and therefore Zen and therefore our practice. It didn't spring from nowhere, but oh boy, what comes up in these next two paragraphs is quite something. I'll read the first to you now. The Buddha continued, Nirvana is where the bodhisattva stages are passed, one after another. The Tathagata's nirvana is where the sustaining power of the Buddhas, of the transformation Buddhas, upholds the bodhisattvas in the bliss of all the samadhis. The Tathagata's nirvana is where compassion for others transcends all thoughts of self, is where the Tathagata stage is finally realized. So let's look at that much. Nirvana, the Tathagata's nirvana, is where the bodhisattva stages are passed, one after another. There's a whole chapter that we went through in some line-by-line detail about those stages. But it's important to understand that Buddhism had been flourishing and the Mahayana had taken root. Okay. So there's some serious time that's passed, many centuries of development and integration and deepening, frankly. And so the Mahayana stages of the path is typically understood as what's called the 10 Bhumi model. And it tends to be presented in the traditional form as a progressive cultivation of virtue, a progressive deepening of patience and generosity and so on, which we totally honor and practice. But this sutra gives a little bit of a different, in fact, quite a different take on the thing. The bodhisattva stages that we went through in some detail in the sutra, from the perspective of this sutra, have not to do so much with the cultivation of virtue over time, but rather it has to do with the gradual collapse of subject-object duality. It has to do with the deep inner realization of Buddha nature. So it's not so much a scholastic understanding, rather progressive realizations and awakenings that culminate in self-realization of noble wisdom. And so it's kind of interesting because the first stage is the stage of joy. And these first three stages, the stage of joy, purity, and radiance, it's the way they are translated into English. It has to do with really understanding from the sutra's perspective that the world actually is mind only. External objects are projections, multiplicity perspective arises from dualistic mind. Things are dreamlike, our Diamond Sutra reflects to us. The belief in a fixed external reality is dismantled, frankly. The first stage of joy is the entry into bodhisattvahood. Great compassion awakens, the vows to liberate all beings, some connection with emptiness and the illusion-like nature of phenomenon. Sounds pretty complete. There's stage one. 2, the stage of purity. Moral purity deepens. I think that's significant. Moral purity deepens. The 6 paramitas are practiced more fully. Conduct becomes free of coarse defilements. Okay? The 3rd stage, wisdom begins to shine, so-called stage of radiance. Insight into emptiness and mind, Buddha nature grows even clearer, and the bodhisattva illumines others, helps with others. And the 4th stage is called flaming wisdom. Kind of like that one. Wisdom burns away remaining afflictions. Strong realization of the illusory nature of duality is clear. The 5th stage, difficult to conquer, means stability in meditation. Stability finally shows up, if you're wondering when that happens. So you're fine. Bodhisattva becomes difficult for Mara or delusion to actually disturb. And the 6th of this, the 6th stage, the stage of manifest presence, direct perception of thusness, of suchness. Dualistic discrimination is largely unseated. And all 3 of these, stage 4, 5, and 6, as presented in the sutra, they have to do really with uprooting this habit energy pattern that we speak of so much. The sutra sings to us over and over again of karmic habit energy patterns. Really, it has to do with seeing ourselves and others in terms of subject and object and grasping and what's grasped, the perceiver and the perceived. And up to here, imagelessness and the twofold egolessness need to be understood and seen. But here, and very significantly, and it's important for us to kind of take this in, that unlike the traditional Mahayana Bhumis, as elucidated in earlier iteration, there's a kind of a line here that many will not cross. The Lankavatara highlights very specifically that Srakas and Arhats can reach up to the 6th stage, but that's it. And the danger is that they fall into a nirvana of their own that is not the Tathagata's nirvana. And that we talked about that in some depth. So only bodhisattvas continue to the 7th and 10th stages. Arhats stop here. And the difference is it requires the sustaining power of transformation Buddhas. Other power. It requires the help of the sustaining power of the transformation Buddhas. Right here in the foundation of Zen. This is the, no one can do this for you, but you cannot do this on your own business. This is very significant to understand, at least have a sense of it. If you still fundamentally operate under the delusion that your willpower alone is all you need to crush through your delusions, I ask you to reconsider this. You need that, and it needs to be strong. You need you some gumption. Oh yeah. But that alone is not sufficient. these transformation Buddhas. These are the Buddhas that arise in forms that can be seen and worked with according to the circumstances of need. This may well mean you. It's quite possible that in some moments you are that transformation Buddha for someone else in the Sangha. And it might manifest by you simply tending to your own business on the cushion where the person next to you cries a river. It can look all kinds of ways. But it also has larger implications. Tara is very important to us. Now, with the help of these transformation Buddhas, the stage of far-going, immovability, good wisdom, and Dharma cloud, which I think is a cool way to end it, starts to come online. So this is the seventh stage, the stage of far-going, true transcendence of dualistic thoughts, perfect tranquility begins. The bodhisattva passes the limitations of lesser practice. In the eighth stage, immovability, there's no regression. And this is a theme that you see in the entire Buddhist canon, the idea that you get to a certain stage and you're not going to fall back anymore. And there are levels of that. I mean, how many times have I connected with practitioners who come in and say, well, I was really doing it for a while, and then, well, not so much, but I'm back, here I am. And like that is the way it is for quite a while, but it doesn't stay like that forever. There actually is an end to that too. This stability of practice, immovability. This mountain will not move, no matter what the weather is. Stage of good wisdom. At this stage, a person becomes useful to others in overt ways. The upaya, their ability to use upaya, starts to sharpen and increase. Their ability to meet beings well becomes more and more on the money, more and more stable. Until finally, in the 10th stage of so-called Dharma cloud, the final stage, wisdom rains down like a cloud, nourishing all beings. Complete maturation of bodhisattva activity. It's the thinnest wisp between that and full Buddhahood. Now, all of those, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th stages, they all have to do, really, if you get down to it, with this radical overturning, this turning about deep within consciousness itself. So much so that the storehouse consciousness itself gets transformed. This is the business. You remember in the Eightfold System, right? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, heart, mind, which means thoughts and feelings, right? And then there's the self-sense, the sense of the experiencer, the feeler, the thinker. And then beyond that one is the storehouse consciousness, which gets kind of interesting, right? This storehouse consciousness. And the teachings are that not only do you have your own individual storehouse consciousness, but there's a collective one too. Jung would be proud. And what happens is, through deep realization, the distinction between one's individual self-sense, all the sense gates, self-sense, and storehouse consciousness, and universal Buddha mind collapses. That's really what needs to be done. I often say what happens is you realize that all those different sense gates and the different sense of self and the storehouse consciousness are it too. And that's kind of a gentle way to say it. That's maybe a useful way to say it to folks at a certain level of training. But the reality is the thing collapses. There's no distinction between any of these things anymore. Your mind is the universal mind. This is what Buddha is talking about. Nirvana is where the bodhisattva stages are passed one after another. The sustaining power of the transformation Buddhas upholds the bodhisattvas in the bliss of their samadhis. Don't be afraid of that word. Either of them. The sustaining power of helpers. Let Tara help. She will. Manjushri will show up if you ask. If you're my practitioner and you make the call, he's going to take it. That's how it works. Can you hear it? Can you receive the subtle or clear communication? What does your intuitive self bring? Because that's the same thing. The sustaining power of the Nirmanakaya Buddhas. Nirmanakaya meaning here the manifest forms. They uphold the bodhisattva in the bliss of their samadhis. How's your samadhi been today? You been all blissful? I hope so. Understand very carefully and very clearly what bliss actually means. I promise you it's not feeling like spiritually giddy all day. It can occur in moments and spots, but don't worry, that will fade. True bliss is not some coarse, fickle thing. True bliss is stable and durable. It doesn't depend on feelings or thoughts. The samadhi of the bliss does not depend on corralling yourself into a pleasant feeling or finally getting everything to go just the way you want it, so then you allow yourself a nice moment. It's way cooler than that. It's the bliss beyond all understanding. And the other power of the Nirmanakaya Buddhas enables this. They sustain it for us. For this, we should be deeply grateful. You have to do your part, believe me. It's a long road to hoe to get to this point. But this is where the sustaining power of transformation Buddhas upholds the bodhisattvas in the bliss of the samadhis, is where compassion for others transcends obsession with self. That's where the Tathagata stage is finally realized. Thus, stages. Thus, cultivation over time, perhaps many, many lifetimes of time. At least 3-4 decades. But then, interestingly, the Buddha goes on. Nirvana is the realm of the Dharmata Buddha. What? Nirvana Buddha, transformation Buddhas, stages, cultivation, development, refinement. Dharmata Buddha, there's none of that. There's not even a list. Can you imagine? There's no list. Where'd the list go? The realm of the Dharmata Buddha. Dharmakaya. Absolute. Oh, wait a minute. Stages, development, cultivation, form. Dharmata, with no list. Dharmakaya, absolute. I'll go ahead and put a list. Why not? Lightning strikes. There shall be no list here. Awakened nature of mind itself. Dharmakaya, true nature. Clear light, bliss, self-aware, luminous, Buddha nature, suchness, thusness, mu. Stages or sudden? Which one is it? Interesting. Very interesting. Just Dharmata Buddha, just Dharmakaya, just absolute, boom, just this, bang. Stages. See, the Lankavatara puts both of these things right up on offer, actually required. Self-realization of noble wisdom, boom. The 10 stages of Bodhisattva path. How many kalpas is this going to take? Direct seeing, Buddha nature, beyond stages, not confined by any silly mental construction of stage 1, 2, and 3. Come on, get out of here, it's ridiculous. And gradual cultivation. Now, the early Zen teachers, Chan really, to be precise, they dealt with this in a lot of different ways. But initially, with the Lankavatara, and I think if you look carefully at the earliest Chan teachers before the koan system really emerged, what I see is that there's an understanding of sudden enlightenment that occurs, and then a gradual cultivation that follows. So that these stages of development are not really so much posited as something you do to earn awakening, but rather it's once an initial insight has occurred, it's the process of cultivating that insight over time. Sudden enlightenment, gradual cultivation. Post-awakening maturation, rather than a ladder that leads to awakening. This is what I see. And that thrived for a very long time. And I think that does accord with what the sutra holds up here. But then something happened somewhere along the line, and these sudden and gradual became schools and became split, and that's a whole conversation I don't want to get into right now in any depth. But a false split became. Sudden is Rinzai, gradual is Soto. There's all kinds of social Meiji era politics and etc. We'll leave it aside. But even before the Lankavatara was produced, it's important to understand that different ways of working with these issues have been up front for a very long time. In the Pali tradition, there's Vipassana and Samatha, insight, calm abiding. Which one's right? In the Mahayana, then, we had this Chittamatra, citta, bodhicitta, mind, so-called mind only. But don't be confused, that's not Lankavatara yet. Sounds like it if you just read the title, but it's not. That was contrasted with Madhyamaka, which itself split. There's the Rangtong, which has its own subdivisions under that, Savatantrika and Prasangika. But then Yogacara, Shentong, in Tibet it's called. And this is the line that the Lankavatara comes from. The Yogacara was a deep influence in the Lankavatara intelligence. It's kind of baked in there. All this happened in India. sudden, gradual. So, my take, I'll give you my take. And if this is useful and helpful in the fullness of time for beings in some way, then I give the full credit of this as a terma to Tara. If it's completely wrong and mistaken, it's mine. Either way, we'll see. But here's my take. Gradual cultivation, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. Sudden enlightenment, moo. Yes, exactly. Then continual integration, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. And then ceaseless expression, ceaseless manifestation, like it or not. Gradual cultivation, sudden enlightenment, continual integration, ceaseless expression. I think gradual cultivation is necessary in the beginning. I've been doing this too long to not notice the pattern. You've got to settle down. You've got to get the mind saturated within a samadhi. You got to know your way around the zendo. I believe you need refuge. All these things are critically necessary. This isn't necessary. This is a gradual cultivation path. And that stays. But then this awakening, this tumbling into reality, it does occur. I don't really think it's so spreadsheetable as to say you check all these boxes and then you earn your kensho. It doesn't work that way. But there is a general pattern to this. And by the way, the kensho doesn't always happen only in formal koan study. There's lots of ways this can occur. But that tumbling into reality, that's a binary thing that either has or hasn't occurred. That's true. But that's not sufficient. So, continual integration, deepening, further awakening. Awakening is not just a singular event. There's a series of them. There's many tumblings into and falling into the reality of ourselves. It's not a one and done. And the way this typically expresses, I would say, is it's like integration kind of stuff. That's a good way to phrase it. The more you integrate what you've seen, the more you can see. Something like this. That which is completely obvious to you after a certain amount of practice was not on offer for you before. And it's easy to lose touch with that. Because actually this process of gradual, continual integration, it does creep up on you. And then this expression, manifestation, expressing Buddha mind, expressing universal mind, expressing Dharma, manifesting it. This is ceaseless. This just goes on and on. And he might not always like your expressions. So a little more cultivation, please. And it just loops around. But what does all this lead to? What's all the to-do about this nothing? This is the concluding bit. The Tathagata's nirvana is where the manifestation of noble wisdom, that is Buddhahood, expresses itself in perfect love for all beings. The Tathagata's nirvana is where the manifestation of perfect love that is Tathagatahood expresses itself in noble wisdom for the enlightenment of all. There indeed is nirvana, the nirvana of the Tathagatas, the nirvana of the Buddhas. Noble wisdom, Buddhahood, expresses itself in perfect love for all beings. Sudden, gradual, whatever else I said there, what's it all doing? Perfect love, actually, is the business of our family, is the business of the lineage. And that manifestation of perfect love, that Tathagatahood, expresses itself also as noble wisdom. It makes a little loop. Noble wisdom, Buddhahood, expresses as perfect love for all, which expresses as noble wisdom. How about that? At the end of this whole thing, it comes down to perfect love for everything. All beings throughout space and time, sentient and insentient, known and unknown, knowable and not knowable. What does it mean to live and to manifest the great Buddha way? What is perfect love for all beings? Perfect love for yourself. Perfect love for your no-self. This indeed, the Buddha says, the Sutra says, is nirvana. So what are we going to do? Or more importantly, what are you going to do? How will you realize Buddhahood? How will you manifest this perfect love for all beings? Even as this crazy world is doing crazy stuff on global, geopolitical, and deeply personal levels. No excuse. In fact, all the more. All the more. If this perfect love can't withstand your heart being broken, it's not worth much. Because that's a guarantee. So now what? How? How will you manifest this noble wisdom? Yes, there's a long way to go, and yes, it's immediately right now. And yes, we could integrate it more, and yes, you're manifesting it right now. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. The nirvana of the Tathagatas is where the bodhisattva stages are passed one after another through the sustaining power of the transformation Buddhas, Nirmanakaya Buddhas. The Buddha's nirvana is the realm of Dharmata Buddha. Moo, no more lists. Thank you. And still, the nirvana of the Buddha is where the manifestation of noble wisdom of Buddhahood expresses itself in perfect love for all. And where that manifestation of perfect love for all that is Tathagatahood expresses itself in noble wisdom for the awakening of all. There indeed is nirvana. Where is it? It's right where you sit. For the sake of all beings throughout space and time, may we realize it. May it be so.